The October 7th attack generated heartbreak in so many directions: deep grief, fear, anger, outrage, and much more. But as the weeks have passed, I've begun to hear an additional reaction, which for me is heartbreaking in its own way. I hear of colleagues and other community leaders expressing a sense of betrayal by some leaders of the Black community. The lament sounds something like this: We, Jews who are white, stood by them, the Black community, when they needed us, including after the murder of George Floyd. We have worked with them in partnership on issues of deep concern to them. But now that we needed for them to be with us, they have turned their backs on us, even in some cases expressing support for Hamas. We thought we were in coalition with them, but it turns out they were not our partners after all. As such, we think it is time for us to reconsider our coalition work with multiracial organizations. The fact that some Black progressive leaders have expressed little support for Israel is perplexing and agonizingly painful. Some of us feel hurt and betrayed. We may feel there has been a rupture in treasured relationships, and we may feel abandoned, as people we felt were our partners are now not here for us in our time of profound need. This is one among many side effects of the October 7th attack and subsequent war, and it is excruciating. But a reaction to it is extremely troubling. I don't have to tell you, my colleagues, that Jewish tradition is unequivocal in its commitment to recognizing the Tzelem Elohim in all people. Our tradition is particularly emphatic on the command to champion the needs of those who are targeted and oppressed in the societies in which we live. We know the soul of the stranger. And so when we stand up for the oppressed, it is not for them, it is for all of us. As such, the Rabbinical Assembly has a long record of support for civil rights going back to the 1950s. It is in our DNA as conservative rabbis and in the historical record of our movement that we stand in solidarity with people of color and with all who suffer discrimination, hatred, and injustice because of their race, just as we have been targeted throughout our history because we are Jews. In short, this is who we are. Unquestionably, this is a time of great pain. But having suffered hurt is not a reason to sever relationships and abandon values that have been defining for us. It is a time for tending our pain and caring for our own communities, but it is not a time to change who we are.
I have heard the same sentiments that you have, but when Jews of color started reaching out in needs of spiritual direction because their white presenting co religionists were saying cruel things to them in person and on social media, even going as far as to demand proof of their Judaism, I knew that something else had broken. The pain that you mentioned is so real, and I too have felt abandoned by folks across lines of difference. I also feel like I'm trapped in the middle once again. Communities of color are not a monolith, and when I hear the Black community being painted with this broad brush, it hurts my heart. I'm also part of the Black community and have been really inspired by some really great work with non-Jewish Black leaders in the Black community over the past couple of months, particularly leading up to MLK weekend. It's hard to be in the middle. And lately, I have felt like there is a double standard that holds non-Jewish communities of color to a particular standard of allegiance, as if there are terms and conditions attached to the receipt of Jewish allyship, and that just isn't fair. Believing firmly in the value of fighting for equality should not be a source of regret in times like this. This doesn't leave room for the nuance of in why communities of color may identify with the plight of Palestinians, regardless of whether or not we feel that there's an adequate level of understanding of Israeli history. Being in the middle makes it challenging when it seems like white presenting Jewish folks aren't held to the same expectation to agree to a set of political opinions or risk being cut off from their people. We are all grieving. We are grieving the atrocities of the past few months. We are grieving the fractures we're seeing in our own communities and in the Jewish community as a whole. We're grieving so many things at the same time and have sparsely had time to figure out how to root our feet again. There's no guidebook for this. but the only way through this is together.
Our hearts ache and our minds explode with the complexities of all of this. Clearly, we and the people we serve need a great deal of love and care, as well as praying for the release of the hostages and for an end to all of the violence. We must also pray for the healing of all the relationships that have been challenged during this time. It is a time to reach out to clergy of color, to Black and Brown leaders in local and national organizations. It is a time to respond to the energies of hatred, violence, and war with outreach, with a desire to rebuild old relationships and create new ones. We must pray that this war will not change our most basic values and commitments. May these terrible days soon give way to a time of peace and dignity for our people and for all people. May it come soon.
Amen.